What's up, everybody? This is Chet, and this is today's Chet Chat. Today, I want to discuss the idea of tearing down statues throughout the country. And so, there's a lot of people on both sides of this issue. Some people say shouldn't tear down any statues. Other people are proponents of tearing down statues, saying that various statues symbolize oppression, slavery, and this, that, and the other. So here's my take on that. And I want to preface this with saying this. Nuanced thought is the antithesis of division in this country. What I mean by that is if people were capable of having a nuanced, complex, multifaceted, layered view on issues, it would prevent the divisiveness that seems to exist in today's society. You know, people are so quick to just jump on one side or reject the other side's proposition without really doing a deep dive. And here's what I mean by nuanced thought. Sometimes things aren't as simple as yes or no. Sometimes things aren't as simple as do I agree with tearing down statues? And let's look at this as an example. Okay. So, where do I stand on this issue? Should we tear down statues? Well, which statues? That's the question. Let's start by talking about why is a statue erected or put up to begin with somebody? Why do you put up a statue of somebody? It is because of their contribution to history. It's because that person made such an incredibly impactful and meaningful contribution to society or to history that the members of that community feel it necessary to memorialize that person in the form of an inanimate object. So, when we talk about whether we should tear down a statue of someone, I think it's important to look at what was their contribution to history. What is the reason that we have a statue of them? So let's start with the Confederate generals, Confederate people, and that sort of thing. That usually gets the most attention. Well, their contribution to society, their mark on history, if you will, was their role in the Civil War. Okay? Presumably that is the reason that there's a statue of them, because they were fighting to support and continue to hold on to the institution of slavery. And we can get into, a discussion on, well, the Civil War wasn't about slavery and that, and that's a discussion for a different time, but I would respectfully submit that the Civil War was about slavery. People say, oh, the states' rights. Yeah, it was the states' rights to have slaves. But that's a discussion for a different day. But the Confederate generals, soldiers, that sort of thing, their contribution was that they tried to hold on to slavery. And that's the reason that there's a statue of them. Now, I understand the argument of, well, we have to remember history. We have to, we have to memorialize this or else we're doomed to repeat it. Well, so we don't really see that in other contexts, though, right? You think about it this way. What if somebody in Europe after World War II put up a statue of Hitler and, the Jewish people, the survivors of and descendants of the Holocaust said, I don't want this statue of Hitler here. This is terrible. This person tried to exterminate an entire race. And people, nobody's saying, oh, well, in order to remember history, we have to have that. No, you have other things like the actual concentration camps themselves. Some of them have been maintained and not torn down as a way to remember and memorialize what happened so that we don't forget history, so that we don't repeat it. But here's the difference between keeping a concentration camp as a memorial to the Holocaust and a statue of Hitler. Okay? A concentration camp is a brick and mortar building. All right, it is not a being. It is not a self-aware entity. The concentration camp itself, the bricks, the boards, the shingles, the foundation, it has nothing against Jewish people. It has no ill feelings. It has no desire to eradicate a race. It was just built by people that did have and espouse those viewpoints. So there's nothing really inherently offensive about keeping a building where something bad happened, as opposed to a statue of the person who espoused those viewpoints, who propagated the desire to exterminate an entire race of people. So that's the distinction I draw, between this idea of, well, we should keep up the Confederate generals because, and in the same vein as keeping, monuments or concentration camps to remember the Holocaust. By the same token, people of the Christian faith, we know that Satan is a character, if you will, in our history. It's an entity that, plays a role in our belief system. But you would never see a statue of Satan at a church. You would never see a statue of Satan in a God-fearing community under the guise of saying, oh, well, we want to remember our history. We want to remember the history that Satan played so we don't repeat it. Now, people would be very bothered by that. People would be extremely bothered by the idea of erecting a monument or a statue of this evil person. So I don't have a problem with taking down Confederate generals. My opinion is they should not have been put up to begin with. I mean, the Confederate Army was an army that raised arms against the Union of the United States for the purpose of keeping slaves, and the Confederate flag was the battle flag of that army, and then the generals fighting for that army. I mean, they should not be memorialized. So, but that's because that's their contribution to society, or their contribution to history, was their role in the Civil War. Now let's move to the tearing down of statues of other people. Let's say the Founding Fathers, under the guise of, or under the justification of, well, they owned slaves. They were flawed people. They had racist viewpoints. Okay, but the reason that you have a statue of them is not because of their role in the institution of slavery. It is not because of their role in racial justice. It was them breaking free of Britain and starting a new country and declaring independence from England and espousing the ideas of self-governance and democracy and a constitution and federalism. That's their contribution to society. That's their contribution to history, and that's why a statue exists of them. So to tear down a statue of them because there were things in their personal life that you don't like, I disagree with that. Because everybody's flawed. Everybody has problems. There's not a single person you can find, the face of this earth, that if you put a statue of them up, you couldn't find somebody that had a problem with it because they don't like them or because they know something about them that's evil. I'm here to tell you, we live in a fallen world. Every single one of us has fallen short. And every single one of us has sin in our life. That's why we need the Lord, in my opinion. So you're not going to find someone who was perfect or without great sin. I mean, and the idea of taking down Martin Luther King's statue because he was an adulterer or whatever. Well, the reason you have a Martin Luther King statue or memorial is because he was an incredible man who made incredible strides and accomplished great things for the civil rights movement and just did wonderful things. If he had issues in his personal life, that's neither here nor there. That does not detract from the great work that he did for racial justice and racial equality. And that's why there's statues of them. So that is essentially my take on it, is you have to look at, why do we have the statue of the person? What is the reason that we're memorializing their life? And if it's something good. And I want to backtrack and say this. The Founding Fathers, the reason there's a statue of them is because they stood for the principles that birthed a nation that one day grew to give equality to everyone. So what I mean is, the world was not perfect in 1776. It wasn't. There was slave trade, Africans were capturing other Africans, killing them, selling them into slavery, and one of the customers, if you will, of that horrible trade was the European colonists. That was going on, and that's the time in which the founding fathers declared their independence from England. But they put into place through the Constitution, through the Bill of Rights, through the Declaration of Independence, these ideas that would grow into what we have now, which is a post-civil rights movement, civil rights law country where all people under the rule of law are seen as equal. So, you have to at least respect the ideals that they stood for. And even if you don't, I mean, the reason that we memorialize them is because they birthed the United States, a country that gives tremendous freedom and tremendous prosperity to a lot of people. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I just think it's, like I said, it's a little bit more nuanced than just I'm against tearing down statues or I'm not against tearing down statues. But you just have to look at the issue with a little bit of depth and think for yourself, not what the political parties want you to think. And I will end this with this. And I said that I would take a small jab at the right on the next video, and I want to do that. Like I said, to be consistent. That's my biggest thing, is to always be consistent in your viewpoint. And the one thing I've seen is a lot of right-wing Republicans saying, "Oh, this is the Democrats are the Democrats are the party of slavery. The Democrats are the party of oppression. The Democrats are the party of the Confederacy, and this, that, and the other. That was their party." But then when they talk about ripping down statues, they say, "You can't rip down our history. It's our history. It's our flag." Well, is it your history, or is it not? Is it the Democrats' history? So we need to be consistent. If we're going to say that slavery and oppression and all that stuff, that was the Democratic Party, then if Democrats want to tear down Confederate slave-holding statues, then they're not doing anything to your history. It's the Democratic history. So once again, I'm not, I'm just saying, just be consistent in your viewpoint. Thanks.